session number 18 of the Silm Film Project. Glad to have everybody back with us here this evening as we get ready to discuss the actual shows, now having roughed everything out. So,
Woohoo!
been looking forward to this. I think we've got Nick here on the mic with us also tonight, so that's good. And I think we're wait, yeah, I'm recording too. Okay, I think I have everything working tonight. Not always the case, but I think I do. So, awesome. So I think we're ready to start in, Dave, when you would like.
Okay, great. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Pausing for the convenience of the editor. Hello and welcome to this brand new episode of the Silmarillion Film Project. I am your co-host Dave Kale, and we're getting ready to start the the meatiest part of each season of the Silmarillion Film Project. For this season, we're starting into the actual episodes, and we're looking at the wonderful work of our writers' room, script outlines and scripts. Woohoo!
That's right.
Yes, let the criticism begin.
That's right.
I can't wait.
Time for
notes.
Time for that wonderful, those wonderful moments when we look at all of the hard work that our team and our writers' room have done, and we rip it completely to shreds. So that's I'm just kidding. That's unlikely to happen. We wouldn't do that.
Probably not.
Probably wouldn't do that. But anyway, that's awesome. So thank you, Dave. So we're before we go, just a couple quick announcements. Just a reminder about our new Signum store. We have a couple new holiday designs that we're working on, which should be up soon. So keep your eye on the Signum store. We've got a Signum Symposium coming up soon on The Tower by Owen Barfield. And that's a symposium is going to feature also Owen Barfield's grandson, who's still involved with the estate there, and then we have, of course, the next script discussion for Silmfilm. So you guys are up to episode 4, right?
That is correct. We're going to be doing episode 4 during the next one, which I may have on the boards lied about when it's going to take place because I forgot that Thanksgiving exists.
Right.
Which is pretty typical for me, so surprising no one.
It's easy to do, actually, when you're just looking at calendars and kind of counting weeks, and I've certainly done that before, that kind of thing before. I almost I was just looking tonight to schedule ahead the next few sessions of this broadcast, and I almost scheduled one for December 31st before I realized that would probably be a conflict. So, yeah, we'll sort these things out. But awesome. One last announcement that I want to make. It's kind of a teaser announcement I've been giving this week. We have a brand new program we're going to be launching at Signum here very soon. Look for information to be posted on this soon. But we are undertaking a new endeavor, which I'm really, really excited about. And that is going to be extracurricular language arts clubs for kids, K through 12 kids. So for teens in high school, for middle school kids, elementary school kids, we're going to be starting a book clubs, creative writing clubs, and conversational language clubs. For school kids. It's something that's been really kind of on my mind a lot this year. I'm a parent. I got 2 kids, one in middle school, one in high school. And, it's, this year, school's been having a hard enough time doing school. What has been happening in a lot of places around the country has been that extracurricular activities have just gone out the window completely. I mean, almost everything that my kids were doing, after school and through school, they're still doing some things. Some of their other, music lessons are still happening, and karate is happening virtually and stuff like that. But a lot of the school-driven, kind of academic extracurriculars are just not able to happen at all. And so we're really looking forward to kind of stepping in and helping to facilitate. And this is right up our street, and I'm really excited about this opportunity. So the Signum Academy clubs, keep an eye out. Keep an eye out for that, as we're going to be officially launching that program here in the next week or two. Hopefully we'll have everything lined up by Thanksgiving, if not very soon thereafter. So I just wanted to kind of, as I say, tease that a little bit, with more announcement to come. By the time we do our next film session, we will certainly have that launched, I believe. So that's my last announcement, a fairly big announcement here. So, okay, let us get into the main session here. So the first episode is called The Light in the West, and we've got 3 plots, right? We've got the A plot, B plot, and C plot of this episode. And our A plot, of course, the centerpiece of episode 1, is the meeting of Beor and Finrod. So the time of the date, that is to say, of the episode is the year 340. And we've got Beor, who is age 67. So he's already a senior citizen. And we have Adenel, who is going to be the future wise woman. She's going to be the one who's going to take over for him. And she is 4 at this time. And Nick, I really loved the idea of having the episode including moments of like obvious mentorship between Beor and even the very young Adenel, her and the other groups, to show sort of Beor as teacher here with the young generation. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, we had a few interesting things that we had to try to work into this episode. One of the biggest issues that we faced, not only in this episode, but in the following one, and to a lesser extent, episode 3, was just finding a story that we could tell in an episode. Right. Because it's all well and good to just say what happens, but for us to have, especially in a season premiere like this, it's not exactly grabbing,
Yeah, I mean, it sets up a lot of stuff, but you're right. I mean, it's easy to think when reading the story, right? When coming across this episode in the Silmarillion, that the discovery of men by the elves and the sort of dramatic way in which Finrod reveals himself, with the harp playing and them waking up and finding this supernatural looking being among them and everything. That's, on the one hand, it's easy to read that and feel like, well, that's a really dramatic moment, right? And it is, but to think about like, no, it can't just be a flash, right? It's not just a scene. It needs to be, we're going to do a whole episode, right? So there needs to be a narrative shape to this whole episode. So I can certainly see how that would be challenging. And there's a lot of setup in this part of the story. I mean, we're working towards, drama down the road, but of course the B plot in this episode is Aradel and her unrest, right? So that also a lot of internal drama, a lot of dialogue, not much in the way of action, very little like to be, like resolved or really kind of moved forward by the end of the episode. So I can certainly see the challenge there.
Right. So one of the things that so I've referred to this episode a number of times, and I probably will more in the future. The episode in season 1, way back when, after the destruction of the lamps, when the Valar are considering what to do.
Yes.
Essentially, all we had really for that episode was they talk about the decision to go to Valinor.
Right.
Which, I mean, like, that's a big deal. It's a huge deal.
It's a huge deal.
Obviously, that's something we want to showcase. But you can't have them make that decision. You certainly can't have Manwë make that decision and then have a bunch of people talking about that decision after the fact.
Right.
And have that be your episode, because you're not going anywhere.
Right. Yeah. I mean, ironically, they were going somewhere, but no, I see what you mean. Like there's no narrative movement in that story. It's,
And so this one was pretty similar, where we were trying to find a way to construct the episode in such a way that we were building to something.
Right.
And of course, my initial thought was to have us just build to the meeting itself.
Right.
But there were a few problems there. One being that we were trying to get them into Nargothrond by the tail end of the episode.
Right.
And if, in thinking about it structurally, all that would be we would just have these two groups on a collision course the entire episode.
Right.
So we wouldn't be like, there's no real drama there. It's just you can see from a mile away that this is going to happen, and we've already told the audience that it was going to happen
because we teased it at the end of season 4.
Right. So that's not interesting.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's interesting, but it's not. It's not good TV.
No, there's no real drama there either. Like it's that's merely postponing, the event rather than actually creating story. Absolutely. Absolutely. So one of the things that it seems like you guys decided to focus on was, as evidenced by the title of the episode, The Light in the West, the expectations. So that one of the things that you guys have done to build drama is to be looking at the expectations of Beor and his people, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And so they're on this epic journey, right, across the world, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And I brought up the bit from Ringworld. I won't go into it. You should read Ringworld by Larry Niven. It's excellent.
It's a really good book.
Yeah, I'm not going to go into the example I keep bringing up about that. But they've been seeking for the light in the west. They've been seeking for the resting place of the sun from time immemorial. Beor himself does not remember when this decision was not there when this decision was made, and he's already oldish when we meet him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right.
So it's like an inherited quest, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like Silmarillion will eventually be.
Exactly. It'll be exactly like that. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
When
that's going to be in over three-dimensional video chat arguing about like how on earth we're going to get drama out of the unexpected part, the long expected party.
Right. Yep. That's if we've gotten there by that time, Yeah, exactly. We'll probably still be in the middle of the Second Age by the time Nessa, Wally, and Matthias take over. But
yeah,
or their children, just
yes,
as likely, really,
Yeah.
But anyway, speaking of children, so Marie has very thoughtfully given us the sort of chunk of the genealogy that are in this episode. So these are folk, not all of whom, of course, are going to be having speaking parts on screen, but just to sort of remind folks of who's here. We've got Beor. So we will have Beor, his son Baran, and his grandson Boron. Boron will be 15 years old. So we got 15, 41, and 67 for at the ages of those three generations. Of course, we'll have so Beor's wife is already dead, right? But his daughter-in-law, Baran's wife, is still there.
Right.
And then we've got Adenel's parents, of course, because Adenel is only 4 in this episode. But yeah, that's great.
So when we worked this out, we went back and forth on a lot of things, and we wound up kind of going in 2 directions at once. We wanted to spend some time with the people of Beor as like in their life. Right. We wanted to see what they were dealing with as humans in the world. And so we talked about having them, like meeting them kind of in media res, crossing over the mountains. We talked about having like more quiet moments with them, and we kind of decided to go in both directions at once. So we get the early the early scene with Beor and Adenel, And Marie, very reasonably, as she's wont to do, brought up a problem there that we had a 67-year-old dude taking a 4-year-old girl out into the woods by themselves.
It's a bad look, you're saying?
Which, yeah, in retrospect, as soon as she brought it up, I went, "Oh yeah, that's not great. We need to work on that." And so, yeah, Maurice's child safety. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
so
we don't want to have to put like a do not attempt, sort of warning. It's
yeah,
we're not advocating that. Yeah, no, right, exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we decided after the fact that there should be some other kids out with them.
Yeah. Besides which, I don't know, would have to be fairly precocious indeed for her to have already been selected as his heir by Beor.
Right.
4-year-old child. I see you're going to be the future leader of our people. Like that would be a lot to ask.
Yeah. I mean, one could say that at 20, that would also be a reasonable thing to be concerned about. But
sure, sure, absolutely. Yeah, no, I hear you.
But also it occurred to me that if Beor was giving an undue amount of attention to this 4-year-old girl, it could bring up accusations of grooming, as which is a thing that people worry about, and rightly so. So get kind of making sure that she's not being accorded like special attention in that way.
No, I really like that scene, the way that you guys were thinking that through, to have Beor, because it really shows that when Beor just takes like, a bunch of children, like he's just a teacher, right? It shows that, and what I really liked about it is it shows that even before, we know that down the road with Adonel and then with Andreth, we're going to get to a place where the people of Beor are primarily led by wise people and not by, military leaders.
Right.
That there's going to be, no leader in action element to their leadership until they get up to Dorthonion. So showing that Beor, they're already, like culturally speaking, they already lean in that direction, right? Beor as leader, Beor shows his leadership, not just because he is the one who is leading them on their march. That's of course very important. He's not only leading them in action, he's also himself a teacher and clearly, accepted and respected as a wise, like a wise man of their tribe. And so, I really like showing him in that role. I think culturally it sets up where we're going to go to. It would be very natural that element would become more and more accentuated when indeed there was no more action required of them in Nargothrond.
Right.
And then it eliminates any need for him to single out Adonel. All he has to do is name her, right? Like speak to her in the crowd of kids, so that the people remember her name when we meet her, years later.
Well, he can take her aside also. It's not like it, it's not like that's a problem. And one thing that I really like about this that was not intentional at the time, but the idea of him passing on his knowledge to later generations comes into play very strongly in episodes 2 and 3.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's going to become an important point, an important part of those episodes, and we're setting that up here, even though we didn't mean to, but it happens. So
exactly. No, that's great. And not to like give too much of a spoiler for our next session, one of the things I want to be talking about, so in our the next session after this, we're going to be talking about some of the sort of the differences in perspectives and the way that those differences in perspectives would manifest themselves in human and elvish culture, and that is a perfect example, right? Like this need and desire to pass down your knowledge to the younger generation. Elves wouldn't do that. Right? I'm not saying they don't teach their children, but it's not the same.
They don't feel the same.
Yeah.
They don't feel the same pressure to do it.
Not at all.
Like my 2-year-old has, and I promise I did not actually teach her this particular thing, but she told me today that she wants to run fast so she can catch dragons. And course, that made my heart grow 3 sizes because, like, yes, we're on the right track.
That's right. That's right. On the right track. That's excellent. That's excellent. Yeah. So no. So anyway, I thought that was really good. Well, let me advance our slide here. So the primary event, which was, as you said, you guys were debating, do you put it at the end of the episode or at the beginning? You decided to put it not at the very beginning, closer to the beginning of the episode, right? The first contact between Finrod and Beor.
I think that. Yes, I'm trying to remember exactly where. I think it was in.
I've got it here.
Yeah.
It's okay, right. They're talking in scene 3. So Act 1, scene. No, it's Act 2, right?
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Yes, because we had to send Mithros and Maglor on their side quest.
Right, we just send them off. So Act 2. So it's scene 7. So it's the third scene of Act 2. So it's what, like halfway through the episode, basically.
Yeah. It's right before the midpoint. Essentially, the Angband scene here is kind of a midpoint break.
Right.
And and it happens right after we contact Finrod and Beor's people.
Right.
Because we didn't want to be revealing that the folks in Angband knew that there were men in Beleriand before Finrod did, which felt weird because they just crossed over.
Right. Yeah. No, that's good. Yeah, cool. No, I like that. So, the harp scene. So when you described the harp scene in the outline, I like the transition. How so the Beor's folks have camped, and so we start the scene with Beor playing the harp, and it's a family celebration, right? Everybody's happy because they've made it over the mountains, right? And they've arrived at what they're all hoping is the land that they have sought, right? That this is, they're going to find the light in the west. Yeah. This is it. So yeah, that image of everybody's falling asleep happily, thinking on, having been celebrating and thinking on their the success of their mission, and then it's just a wonderful setup for Finrod's arrival and them waking up to find, this godlike figure playing the harp among them, especially since, of course, I have to imagine that his playing is going to be significantly different from theirs, right?
Yeah. So a long time ago, I remember watching like one of those old VH1 music documentaries, and somebody talking about watching Jimi Hendrix play the guitar for the first time,
right? And
talking about how he was able to pull sounds out of the guitar that they had never heard or even known that the guitar could make.
Right.
And I mean, well, granted, Finrod's not playing the Star Spangled Banner, but it should kind of evoke that kind of awe,
right? Even
in just the technical playing.
Yeah. Just so my guess, and I was looking over to see, because Philip Menzies was here live with us originally, but he's had to go already. Unfortunately, he's not with us now, because I was going to ask him what he thought. I'm thinking the playing of Beor would probably be more like
more pentatonic.
Yeah, and even just the merest kind of accompaniment, right? Either as you say, like a kind of pentatonic plucking, or even just sort of a strumming, mostly to accompany singing, right? And it's the impression that I get anyway from Anglo-Saxon poetry, that's what the harp was usually used for. Like they sort of pass the harp around. Everybody in the place plays the harp, not, I think, because everybody in the place is like trained in like immensely intricate harp playing, but because you strum it, right? I mean, you strum it on the beat, on the beat when you're reciting poetry. So it's just kind of background. It's not really so like imagining somebody like plucking it and playing like you can like a very skilled person can play a harp would be uh, something that even though it is the very instrument that he was playing, I think it would seem almost alien, almost magical in that way. So yeah, I think that's pretty cool. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, Maria, I agree. There's a lot going on with music with the House of Beor in this episode to show their culture. We're gonna get Phil's gonna have his work cut out for him here in this episode. I was thinking that already when I was reading the outline. Absolutely. Okay, and so he's gonna speak Sindarin to them. How were you guys imagining their reactions to him? Mixed? Yeah, I mean, in the context, right? Again, like they've just been celebrating, like we have arrived in the West, like we're gonna. I don't know. I mean, are they anticipating? Like, will they be talking about the gods? Will they have imagined that they will meet gods in the West? Is that are they that specific in their imaginations? Do you think? Such that they're going to think that, this is exactly what they were talking about last night. Well, their songs, the night before have talked about meeting the gods. And then there seems to be it's like they summoned him, right, with their song or not. Or were you guys thinking about playing that differently?
Yeah, we were thinking that they would kind of see Finrod as one of the lords of the West they heard of from the Avari. In fact, this meeting is very much like the story that the Avari would have told about the first meeting of Orome and the elves. It's not totally like it, but it's there are certainly elements of it. And Finrod is, I mean, for crying out loud, he is glowing. His eyes, you can see the light of the West in his eyes.
Right.
And yeah, he's pretty clearly not like he's not human. He's not even Avari. He's something else entirely. He's he's an order of being that they have never encountered before. So yeah, there should be some sort of trepidation.
Yeah.
You think about every angelic encounter in the Bible.
Exactly.
It's pretty
right.
terrifying.
Yes. The first thing angels always say is "Don't be afraid." Right. I mean, yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Well, which leads me to actually wonder, what stories did they hear from the Avari? Do we think? I mean, yeah, I've heard the story about Orme, but how did that story go when the Avari told them? Because of course they heard it from the people who didn't follow him into the West. Now we know that like not all of them didn't follow because they like disliked or distrusted Orme, but in their stories, I wonder if they will have heard any versions of the story in which, they're being put on their guard again.
Well,
by the Avari, I mean.
Yeah, well, thinking about it geographically, the elves that they are most likely to have encountered during Beor's lifetime are probably Nandor,
Mm-hmm.
who in our story are not antagonistic towards, like they don't think of the Valar antagonistic. Their purpose for staying was because that was their purpose, right? Not because they were nervous about the Valar, or like it's not quite like the original Avari.
Right. Yeah, as Michael Dennis is pointing out, they're more likely to have heard from, as you say, the Green Elves who started off on the journey and didn't finish it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. No, that makes sense. So, therefore, the stories that they have heard are more likely to be positive stories, but yet the Avari, the Avari or the Nandor that they met would be telling about how they chose not to go. Would they have been warned about, the Dark Hunter? I mean, would they have been told scary stories about the enemy?
I mean, they probably have stories of their own about the enemy. So, like it's possible. Like, if I were to think about the way that myth works, they probably would have adopted some of the stories
Hmm.
that they picked up along the way and incorporated them
Hmm.
with with the story of
Yeah.
Morgoth out in the east. Now, of course, they don't know the name Morgoth, but the Lord of Light, well, I guess that's kind of weird that they're
Yeah.
fleeing from the Lord of Light, but they're going to the Lords of the West, where the light is going. But it's a different light, isn't it?
It is, and there's, I mean, I you know, we just did the Tale of Adenel and all that stuff in my Morgoth's Ring discussion just like a month ago, and so yeah, I mean, I was thinking about all this a lot as we were talking our way through that, because yeah, I mean, there's obviously those who set out to find the light in the West are doing so defiantly, right? Defiant, like in defiance of Morgoth's claims to be the Lord of the Light, right? And to be, the Lord of Light who will protect them from the darkness, or who will, leave them to the darkness. That was his whole, move. So when they set out, they're rejecting that. They're rejecting that identification. But as you say, about the, sort of the growth of myth, and the writing of myth. This is another thing Tolkien talked about this a lot, of course, that, myths, people forget that myths are stories. That is, that seems like a silly thing to say, like who forgets that myths are stories? But I mean, in the sense of a story that somebody wrote, like myths are works of art, like somebody wrote that story, somebody told that story, and myths are told and retold usually because they are good stories, like they have artists behind them. There's human genius involved in the writing of myth. It doesn't just happen spontaneously, and so thinking about the kind of mythic stories that those of the those who are like the parallel of the faithful, right, that have left and gone towards the West, that have abandoned the worship of Morgoth, and gone into the West, there would be a deliberate reconstruction of things, right? A seeking of the light in rejection of the Lord of Light, who set him the deceiver who set himself up as the Lord of Light, and so I wonder, but again, this is the other thing, right? They would have the stories of the gods, right, that they're going towards, but they've been visited. Their people have been visited by a great and glorious God before, and it didn't go well, right? So it's interesting, I wonder if there would be some. We don't want to create a lot of division. We don't need to have like a schism. I mean, I'm not suggesting anything radical. I'm just kind of, I would think there would be an edge, even of uncertainty, to their reception of him, wondering. There's got to be somebody among the people of Beor who's saying, is this too good to be true? It's almost like we conjured him with our song. What did we summon exactly? Right. That's, I think, would be something that would kind of come out in their responses. You see what I mean?
Yeah. Brianna said something about the wishing on the morning star from the song the Rainbow Connection, because Kermit's asking us to wonder, like, whose idea was that?
Right. Somebody thought of that. And someone believed it. Right. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Of course, I pointed out to her that was Nessa's lullaby tonight. This very evening, at her request. So, unsurprisingly, a lot of my world revolves around families.
Yeah. I hear that. Yeah. No. Exactly. So that's Yeah, yeah, that I think is important to remember. Um, it's not going to be only, there will be doubts and uncertainties because they've been taken before. I mean, they're defined culturally as the group of people who resisted. Well, they didn't quite resist being taken in, but they left. Right? You know, they threw off the yoke. They dissented. Um, so there's going to be a little bit of resistance, I think, that needs to
Right.
be overcome. And I think that that can show itself. I don't think it has to show, like, Beor doesn't have to be like hostile and resistant to Finrod. You know, I think that the way that I would imagine handling it, somebody should be resistant, right? Like, we don't have to have a big schism. We don't have to have like a clearly defined, you know, central, you know, sort of locus of resistance necessarily, but it should be said. Somebody should ask the question, you know, how do we know that this is not the deceiver come to us in a different guise?
Okay.
Beor, though, I think is not, I wouldn't think this would just be Beor expressing that to Finrod, right? I would say that Beor, because this is another thing that came up in the end of in the end of Morgoth's Ring. There was a passage where Tolkien was describing how, like, the elves in general, but especially the Noldor, came across to mortals that they met, right? Like, they're saying, like you can't mistake that, you know, like, Morgoth can't fake it, right? There's some effects that he can create, but he can't fake the, like, feeling of meeting one of the elves, right? There is a presence about them that is unmistakably wholesome and good. You know, it's like rainbows. And so having Beor have the conviction, have him looking into the glowing eyes of Finrod and say, you know, no, I'm not worried. I'm not worried. This is not, you can, this is no deceiver. Showing his wisdom, right? Showing his perception and his leadership and the people's trust of his leadership, right? But just having somebody ask that, like, isn't this a little too convenient? You know, he appears among us, you know, like a Lord of Glory, just as the deceiver appeared among us as a Lord of Glory, you know, asking for our allegiance. Finrod, of course, can help by his response. Of course, he doesn't, he can't, and it's interesting. It's the interesting moment to do this because Finrod can't speak directly for himself immediately, right? He
Well,
because he doesn't know their language.
well, so there's a couple of things that I would draw your attention to, particularly scene 9 down there at the bottom of your screen.
Yes.
Um, we do so back in season 2, in episode 2, after we did the first contact between the Valar and the elves at Cuiviénen, we did a bit where Orome was kind of like moving through the elvish settlement, and it was clear that he had been there for a while, and that's kind of the feeling that we wanted to mirror here with Finrod.
Right.
Now, this is sometime after the initial contact, but I'm thinking that it probably wouldn't be terrible to have, and I know that we have Beor speaking with him in that scene, but before that conversation takes place, maybe a little side conversation between Beor and Baron as they watch Finrod, you know, kind of like interacting with their people, that kind of hits on that note. Is that something that would interest you there?
It would. Although, again, I think you know, part of the sort of just incorporating the initial reaction, you know, like general positive,
right. We would,
you know, surprise and delight and awe, but some trepidation, some concern. The other thing, of course, that I'm thinking of is, you know, Stephen H., of course, is saying that, of course, Finrod is telepathic. So, and the books, and what I'm wondering if we could include in that scene, the first scene, I mean, scene 7, is he wouldn't know their language. He wouldn't speak. Wouldn't just come out and start speaking fluently in their language.
Right.
But he can catch something of their thoughts and, of course, perceive their body language, which I wouldn't imagine would necessarily be subtle. They're not trying to hide their reactions, right? So he'd be able to read the room. He'd be able to sense some of their thoughts. He would hear their language. We're also told in the text that their language was really easy for him to pick up because it had borrowed many of its structural elements from the language of the Avari. So there would be some words that would be easy for him to say or to guess, and so having him utter like a word or phrase or something in their speech there to sort of show that process of how he's not able to just like make a florid oration in their speech. That would be too much and would look weird. But for him to say something, to them in there, which again would like kind of maybe creep them out, but some of them, but would also enable him to, because he would see that they were afraid, right? Some of them were afraid, and he would want to, he's Finrod, which means both that he is intelligent enough to diagnose. Again, he's A, telepathic, B, intelligent enough to diagnose what's happening here and what they're likely thinking, right? What they might be thinking. He doesn't know about what Melkor did. He doesn't know that history, right? But still, he would guess that they're spooked, but he also, being Finrod, would want to reach out to them, right? Would want to reassure them, and so some kind of word or phrase of reassurance in their own language would, I think, be pretty cool to show him beginning to put that together. And then, of course, as you say, by the time we get to the next scene with them, he can be completely fluent, and that's not a problem.
Perhaps even fear not.
Yeah. Yes.
Or behold, I bring you tidings of great.
I bring you tidings. Well, they're frankly mixed tidings, right? Don't get your hopes up.
But fear not. It's probably not and it evokes the kind of meeting that we're seeing here.
Yeah.
Because anybody who has even a passing familiarity with angelic encounters would recognize that.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I like Maria's suggestion too. She said he would want to alleviate their concerns. So if someone says, is this the enemy? Something like that, which they could say in like a hushed voice, assuming that he can't understand their language, right?
Yeah.
And then he responds by saying, "I am not the enemy," because he would get the vocabulary word, right? He would understand the word enemy based upon the connection between their language and the Elvish languages, and he would have understood enough of the the patterns in order to be able to figure out how to repeat that sentence and change it around to the first person, right? So that sounds, Marie, like exactly the kind of linguistic work that Finrod could very well do on the spot in order to guess how to communicate with them. I do like the fear not thing, though maybe Nick, that's the first thing he says in Sindarin, right? So we could have that. We could have a subtitle for that. But anyway, now so Maria, I think that's a really good it's a really good suggestion. That's exactly the kind of thing that I was thinking of there, and that's what I also mean when I say he's smart enough to kind of put it together. I mean, if they're saying this, right, if they're talking about the enemy and trying to decide if he's the enemy, he's going to be like, oh, wow, I didn't realize they'd know that, right? Does this, so he would immediately be thinking like, they have legends about the enemy. They've heard of the enemy. I wonder what their background is. He'd already be, moving in those directions. And that, of course, helps to set up conversations between him and Beor later on, either in this episode or of course, in the next episode, in order to sort of help with the revealing of the history of men and of their people. Okay, good. Sorry, let me go back to the slides here for a second. So this is building up to really the dramatic climax of the episode is the revelation of the bad news, right? I mean, poor Finrod
It's the
has to burst
the
their bubble.
decision. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. Well, yeah. Their choice is the sort of the culmination, right? But
Right.
we're leading up with all of this anticipation, right? They're going into the west. They're going to go find the light in the west, and they're all focused on finding the light in the west, and they believe they've arrived. Look at this beautiful land. This must be the land that our forefathers have taught us about, and here we shall meet the gods, and they shall reveal the light. And Finrod appears among them. Lo and behold, oh my goodness! Anyone who didn't believe, or who harbored doubts is now, once they're convinced that it's not Satan, are like completely excited about this. And then of course Finrod has to be the one to say, yeah, so about the light in the west, bad news about that. And it's interesting, one of the things that interests me, Tolkien doesn't do anything with this story. I mean, not directly. The disillusionment of men happens completely off stage, right? In the Silmarillion itself. We hear about it through false Amlach in the debate, right? But we don't really hear about it anywhere else. So I think this is a really, really fun opportunity to focus on this. How exactly do they handle this? I mean, we've just done a whole season of how the Noldor are going to handle telling the Sindar what happened and the backstory and how that backfired, right? So here's Finrod, of all people, right, who was caught right in the middle of that whole, let's not tell the Sindar everything story. Now confronted again with, what do I tell them? How much do I tell them? Now, obviously, I'm not saying it's the same situation, but here he's got to tell them backstory, right?
Right.
And there's got to be some awkwardness attached to that, just for him as a Noldo, not just for bursting their mythic bubble there.
Right. And it's important that you bring this up because it creates a problem for us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't have a lot of time for him to be explaining his position on all this stuff. So most of the things that he's got to tell them are mostly going to have to be things that they'll just accept rather than having a bunch of questions. So like he can't go into too much detail about a lot of things, not because he's holding it back, but for the very meta reason that we can't afford to have him show it to them right now, because then we have to answer those questions, which, I mean, like, I don't think that these humans are going to have trouble understanding where he's coming from there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, mind meld that way. Right. So
that's true. A mind meld would be really fast, Stephen. Yeah. Just kind of download the history of the Noldor to Beor there.
Right.
Yeah.
While dramatic music plays in the background.
Yeah.
Boom, 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 boom,
yeah.
Boom,
we
boom,
show
boom,
a quick flash of scenes, from seasons 3 and 4.
Well, I mean, we should do some of that so that we can show that he's kind of like showing it to them in their mind, and that's fine. It needs to be stuff that they can just accept on the spot, and we don't need to show him telling him, oh, by the way, I got to tell you about this thing that happened. It was a pretty big deal. I wasn't there, but, like a bunch of my family killed a bunch of people from my other side of my family, and it was really awkward.
There was a bunch of awkwardness, really.
There's a king in Doriath who has this big, oh, by the way, you're not allowed in there.
But don't take it too bad. He doesn't like any of us, really. I mean,
and it's not about you. He's just racist.
It's not you, it's us. Exactly. He's just a jerk that way. I'm sorry, but yeah.
Right. And anyway, he is mad at us because of this thing that I personally wasn't there for, but so like those guys that live up north, like they're okay, but don't don't let them see you touching any of their stuff.
Right.
They really don't like that.
Right. Welcome to
You
the
know.
West. Really, we're all happy to see you, except most people. But, you know, some of us really
So-
are quite enthusiastic.
So he can't really get into the kinslaying without having them ask those questions.
Yeah.
At least on screen. He can like, it's fine that he shows stuff like that, but
So-
not in on screen for our story.
It occurs to me that he would primarily tell the stories. Like, so a fun opportunity that I don't know if it's actually an opportunity, and I don't know that we would really show it on screen exactly, or maybe not in full, clearly. But I'm thinking about fairy and drama, right? I mean, Tolkien talks about this and on fairy stories, that one of the skills that the elves have, right, is to, you know, when elves tell stories, you can mistake the secondary world for the primary world, right? I mean, they're able to create the sort of glamour or illusion of the story, like you're in the story, like it's happening around you. This seems to be one of the things that's happening to Frodo during that time when he is almost falling asleep, or when something is happening to him that is like falling asleep in the Hall of Fire in the Fellowship of the Ring. You know, when he's kind of transported off by the elvish singing that he hears. So I would think that would be would be sort of how he would tell the story, you know, to certainly to the whole group, to sort of help them to see. So what I'm wondering is if the actual, like the trees in the Silmarils, if that might be something that he would want to show them, right? Or, well, okay, so let me back up a second, actually, and say, what's his goal exactly? Finrod's goal. What's his goal with them? I mean, he's inviting them back, right? But I mean, but even that, surely in some sense, is a kind of a means to an end, right? What is his end? What's he setting out to do?
Well, it seems to me that it's kind of like it's almost kind of like first thing, he sees the life that they're living, right?
Yeah.
And like they could totally do so much better. Like he's already seeing that in his mind and,
sure.
and whatnot.
And and like benevolent plans to, you know, bless and encourage them, and how their lives can be improved and all that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Rhiannon says that he loves them and he wants to share his knowledge with them. Marie says Finrod really likes getting to know people and making new friends.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, new friends.
Exactly.
He's genuinely curious about these people. Yeah, like all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So, now, of course, when you're asking what his goal is, it depends on which scene we're talking about.
Right.
Because
right.
in the introduction scene, his goal is quite different. He's basically looking to kind of like get them he's essentially giving them his calling card, essentially, in the first time he meets them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Sorry.
Yeah. And he is, I mean, I agree with Stephen H. that he's also going to be bringing them up to speed on the world they're entering into, just teaching, essentially. You know, like his goal is to teach them about Beleriand and how things are. And as you say, like he's going to want to warn them, like, okay, so there's a forest in the north. It's really nice. Careful about that. You know, might not want to go there. You know, Caranthir lives straight up to the north. He can be cranky. Watch out for that. I mean, there's both practical and general things that he would certainly want to teach them and want to help them understand, not to mention, of course, Morgoth himself.
Right.
So yeah, absolutely. I'm just thinking, I'm thinking about, like, so in particular, I'm thinking about the bad news here, right? So you're Finrod and you're hearing the men, both hearing and sort of perceiving telepathically the hope of the men, right? You know, they're talking about the light in the west, like we are going to find the light in the west. Like from the very beginning, as soon as they say that, like we seek the light in the west, Finrod has to be like, oh crap, okay, like what do I tell these poor people, right?
Right.
How do I break this to them? I don't want to crush them. I don't want to crush their. He's going to see their hope as a beautiful thing. He's going to perhaps even marvel at it, right? Because he knows the Valar did not go to find them like the Valar came to find the elves. And so he's going to be, I think, marveling at the fact that somehow they've received some kind of call, right? How did you even know that there was a light? It's going to be amazing to him. He's going to want to figure out, how did they come to know that there's a light in the west, and how whoever informed them that there's a light in the west, how did they not tell them that it's not there anymore? Anyway, like he's got to be wondering, like, what is my role here? What is my job here? If you see what I mean, like mythically speaking, with these people.
I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
What if there is a an element of self-interest to it, in the sense that what if he's taking the appearance of? So I think you're right. I think he would ask those questions, those good questions to ask. You know, how did you know? But I think also that those questions have implications.
Right.
Like, wait, how did you know? Like, it's possible that they might take this as a sign that something's happening, that fate is moving, or that maybe the Valar are taking an interest in Middle Earth again.
Yes.
So the appearance of men might actually be like might actually be a hopeful thing for him, and so he wants to pull that thread and follow it and kind of see what he can find out.
That is a really interesting point, Dave, because they have been cut off now for some time from news from Valinor, right? What are the Valar thinking? What are the Valar planning? You know, apart from the occasional dream from Ulmo, they're getting radio silence from the West. So you're right. Not only the appearance of the aftercomers, right, whom they were expecting to arrive, but the fact that it's like they've been sent on a mission to Beleriand. Who would do that? Who could do that? And how could it not be somehow tied up in the story of the Noldor there? That's a very logical conclusion for Finrod to draw. It makes me think this should come up at the discussions with Fingolfin, you know, when we get to that point of the season.
And of course, arguably, he's not wrong.
Right.
Things are maybe going to unfold a little bit more slowly than even he, an elf, would anticipate, but I guess not that much more slowly. Right.
And of course, the cool thing here, though, just to add one more thing to this, the cool thing is that although Finrod would have no way of knowing it, the Valar themselves would likely, if Orome were there, in fact, listening to Beor talking about the light in the west, Orome would probably have the same reaction. Namely, that this is a sign, because the Valar did not, in fact, tell the men this. The men got this straight from Iluvatar.
Right.
Which is what makes the humans different from the elves. The Valar didn't go. Iluvatar came directly to humans in ways that he never came to the elves, and didn't even come to the Valar in a sense, right? I mean, he's dealing directly with the humans. Anyway, that's it's just kind of an interesting kind of angle on it. That in fact, like the fact that humans have not only arrived but have arrived knowing and seeking the light in the west is big news no matter who you are. That's big news for the elves. It would even be big news in Valinor, you know, if they were hearing this. So that, I think, is definitely something that we should make much of.
Yeah. So it's important to, and I don't know how much of this is explored on the PowerPoint there, but I mentioned before Maglor and Mithras' side quest, right?
Yes.
So in the beginning of the episode, we have Finrod out hunting with Maglor and Mithras, and while Yeah, Marie says it's kind of the C plot. I didn't
Right.
realize that it was in there. Um, so they go off and they have conversations with first Angrod and Ignor, and then with Fingolf and Fingen,
Yes.
which I think are good opportunities for us to kind of examine what the elves think about all this, because Finrod's not really going to reveal that much about how he feels when he's just talking to men, because that's super awkward, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Plus,
He's
I
not
mean,
gonna, like,
he's going to
by
want to
the
think
way,
it through, right, and
yeah,
talk it through with his
things
family.
I think about you guys,
Right.
that's weird.
I'm trying to figure
Um,
out whether your arrival is a portent of doom. Let's talk about
I
that, can we?
I have decided that you are not orcs.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have decided not to tread on you, and yes, yeah.
Right.
But yes,
So
good. Going to your point about Mythos and Magor there, because so the C plot, leaping to that because that's fine, is so there is going to be some discussion around Beleriand within this episode of what this means, right? You know, what the response to the arrival of men should be, and we've got a couple different threads, right? We've got Mythos and Maglor, so they bring news to Angrod and Ignor. So they come to Dorthonion, and they're concerned, right? The idea is that, you know, they're thinking like maybe their dad wasn't wrong about men.
yes.
Yeah, right. Because Feanor, of course, in his speech was speaking of, no other race shall oust us, says Feanor. Well, here they are, right? Here they are. This is, so it begins, the arrival of them. And even though the sense that I got from the outline was that you had Mythos and Maglor kind of distancing themselves from Feanor's proclamation there, or from Feanor's speech. You know, they're not just coming around being like, see, look, you know, Dad said they were going to come and here they are. They're not just speaking, re-urging the words of Feanor, right?
Right, because like they've seen them. Like these are not like people who are going to come in and wipe us off the map.
Right. It's not. They're not. They're certainly not a threat.
And I know that we talked either last season or the season before that it had to have occurred to the elves at some point that the orcs were the second born. We didn't really do much with that.
Right.
And I don't think that they could really hold that thought for too long, because if they're children of a Luvatar, that's, like that doesn't make sense. Like they don't look like children of a Luvatar.
Finrod would explode that idea. I mean, the Finrod of the Athrobeth would explode that idea in 2 seconds, right? I mean, it's
right.
Yeah,
right.
That's clear.
But yeah, so basically they do still have questions, because this small band of people that have made it over the mountains, like they seem like they're not much of a threat, even if they do have hostile intentions, which they certainly don't seem to, because Finrod's been hanging out with them for weeks, and he spent some time with them and everything. Like he seems to think they're cool. But what if there's more of them? Yeah, Marie says it there. What if there's more of them? Which there are, of course, a lot more of them.
Which there are, yeah, exactly. Those who fear that there are many more coming who will be more of a threat are not wrong at all, right there. They are exactly correct.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. No. So okay. So that's one kind of area of, and it's really awesome of you guys to be remembering, to be locating this with the Feanorians and remembering back to Feanor's speech. Again, that's another thing that's not explicitly in the Silmarillion. Nobody says this, right? Nobody makes a speech like this in the Silmarillion when the men come in. like, hey, Feanor was right, like, or whatever. But so that's well remembered, and I think really smart that Maedhros and Maglor would be doing that. But then, of course, Fingon is going to... So Angrod and Aignor go to Maedhros and Maglor. Does Fingon meet up with Maedhros and Maglor again at, up with Fingolfin and Fingon? Sorry, does Finrod meet up with them again? Do they go up? I was a little confused about movements.
Sorry.
Maedhros and Maglor, do they go up to Fingolfin?
Maedhros and Maglor travel from Assyrian up to Dorthonian and then up to Baradathel.
Okay.
Finrod does not travel.
Finrod doesn't go, right, because he's staying with the people of Baer. So,
he stays with men the entire time. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, so it's just Maedhros and Maglor. So Angrod and Aignor are sort of... what do we understand? How do we understand their reactions to the potential usurper line of thinking?
So we're still kind of working on that. One of the thoughts that I have on it is that they should certainly feel a certain amount of trepidation.
Right. It's perfectly plausible. Now, I mean, I got to think that, like, recalling Feanor's words that led them on the march out of Valinor is not like, the main road to Angrod's affection, as he was the angry one, of course, back in the day in season 3. But still, like,
their brother seems to think everything's fine. So like as far as they're being told. So
right. And I don't think that we should indulge in any over the top, like, Aignor being really anti-human or something. I mean, there's a kind of an obvious temptation to do that, right? To have Aignor say some, like, ironical things, soon to become ironical things about, humans and everything. And,
I mean, there are varying degrees of heavy-handedness with which one could approach that. I'm certainly leaning towards the subtler end of the sliding scale. I'm okay with him being wrong about humans. I am less okay with him being very wrong about humans.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the first thing that occurs to me is because Angrod has never been a friend of the Feanorians, right? They're neighbors. Right. He's learned to live with them, right, and to work with them, and he certainly knows that he needs them as allies. So he's not going to be rude to them. He's not going to, but I could imagine Angrod's first reaction when Maedhros and Maglor. Now, they are the two least objectionable of the Feanorians, but still,
But they're going to bring up the most objectionable Feanorian.
Exactly. Feanor. Exactly. Right. So Angrod's reaction is probably going to be tending towards hostility, right? Like, I think, and so I can imagine Aignor stepping in as a kind of mediator there and basically saying to Angrod, let's not throw out this idea. Like, it is, we do have to be alert. Like, when we came here, we didn't know about the orcs, and now there's this, we don't know, who knows what could have happened with the men. He could even say some things which are in fact perfectly true, right? We don't know about the men and what, he could even say something like perhaps, Morgoth has been and corrupted them as well, which of course is kind of true. So I would imagine Aignor's role there would be, because I'm imagining Angrod as kind of on the opposite, as oppositional, with the Feanorians. I'm imagining Aignor as kind of a middle ground there, and therefore saying some things which will be a little bit ironic in the long run, but not saying anything rash and silly. There.
So you're thinking about having Angrod be more like, are you saying that my brother is just an idiot, that he is just foolish?
That would be a line of approach for him, right? I mean, he's gonna be. I mean, bottom line, he's gonna be grumpy, right? He's just gonna be remembering Feanor and like recalling Feanor on that day, as I said, not the pathway to Angrod's affections. Right. So he's going to be, but he's not going to want to just be rude to Maedhros and Maglor. So I would think that it would express his irritation, his resistance to supporting any of Feanor's ideas would express itself in opposition to what they're saying, not personal hostility to them. And I agree with you that him siding with his brother, even potentially a little bit heatedly, would be a pretty natural way for him to arrive at that or express that. Yeah, good. Marie says everyone in the conversation admits that Morgoth is the source of the rumor that men will usurp elves. But the question is, how much of that is a lie, right? If Morgoth has been and corrupted the humans and, set them on to do this, just because Morgoth said it was going to happen doesn't mean that's not true.
Well, in the bigger picture, it is 100% true, because men are going to usurp the elves' place in the world eventually.
Yeah, I mean,
not for millennia, but eventually that's what's going to happen.
Men are going to take over the world. Fact, men have been corrupted by Morgoth, and most of them are actively in his service. Fact, men are going to take over the world, right? And the elves will diminish and fade. Those things are both true, right? Obviously, there's a lot of other parts of the story than that, but yeah, no, this is important. So okay, Fingolfin and Fingon. How is Fingolfin and Fingon's response going to differ from Angrod and Agnor's response?
Okay. So, the conversation with Angrod and Agnor kind of revolves around the more. In fact, only one participant in these conversations survives the first day.
That's true. And we don't really know what he thinks about it.
And that is like for certain values of surviving at that.
Right.
So anyway, the difference between the conversation is the first one is kind of more esoteric. It's more kind of like, what does this mean for us and our place in this world?
Right.
The conversation between them and Fingolfin and Fingon is more practical. Like, right. What does this
more
mean
military
for us on the ground?
Yeah.
But it's certainly more about what the situation actually is.
Right.
Right.
Well, and also, Fingolfin's the High King, right? So there's got to be a question, they've got to be asking questions like, we kind of have most of Beleriand parceled out among us, oh High King. Like, what's your High Kingly plan with the newcomers here exactly? Where are they going to live? Whose land are they going to live on? How's that going to work out? Are we letting them stay? So yes, I can certainly imagine that Maedhros would be interested in approaching that particular side. As you say, much more practical elements of the situation. Now, the people of Beor are not many.
Right.
You guys have them at under 100 total, right?
Yeah. My first thought was a gross, because that's hilarious, but yeah.
Right. But then you realize that it's not really polite to say that of people.
To refer to people as
extremely
gross.
Vulgar.
Yeah, it is. It is a vulgar expression.
Well, I wouldn't tell them that to their face.
It's the one thing that Angrod, Agnor, Maedhros, and Magor can all agree on. Right. So, but anyway, as Michael says, they're not exactly overpopulating the continent yet. No, but the question is, they will probably grow, and but more importantly, there might be more. They have no reason to think that this group of men who came over are it, right? So, what else is going to happen, and where are they how many of them are there? Are there others? Because they know that, right? The people of Bayor know there are others coming, right? So, I mean, that rumor of that can also be, I mean, I think that that would be one of the things that Finrod would include in his reports, wouldn't he?
Right.
Right. There's actually several other camps of these men on the other side of the mountains. So
it's kind of like almost a reversal of the colonization of the Americas in a way. And like, sure, it's great to be friendly to this first batch of people that, give you shiny things and all kinds of other stuff, like interesting and cool stuff happens. Then everybody starts getting sick, and then there's a lot more of them, and then they won't let you go across your hunting grounds because they've put fences up, and like there's, like that's a valid thing for them to be concerned about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is. Okay, so this is going to culminate in Fingon volunteering. He's going to go out and say, "All right, I'll find out more. Right? I'll find out more about how many they are, what they want, where they're going to, where they're hoping to live, what their goals are." So no, I can, and that's nice because of course we're going to have Fingon's primary role, his primary connection is going to be with Hador and the largest population of people. So starting him down that road here makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, cool.
Before we leave there, how do you feel about Sauron being the manufacturer of Grond?
Loved it. Absolutely loved Sauron making Grond for Morgoth. On the one hand, like the idea of Morgoth forging Grond himself, of course, has its own kind of mythic, like, for him to bring forth the great hammer that he made himself would be kind of, epic. But I thought it was a stroke of genius. I really did, because of the way it frames the season, right? Which I know you were thinking of, how, of course, we have the big reveal. In fact, the only action Grond is ever going to see happens at the end of the season, right? In episode 13, in the duel with Fingolfin. So setting that up, but having Sauron being the manufacturer of Grond, the whole idea of like, and I present this great weapon to you, who is the, you who are the greatest, and then to see when he actually takes up the weapon is when he's going to lower himself in Sauron's mind. And so the opportunity for contrast, between Sauron's whole attitude towards Morgoth in the presentation of the gift and Sauron's attitude at the end when he sees how his gift, the circumstances under which his gift comes into use. That's just, that's awesome. I absolutely love that.
And that won't ever be used again. Although it occurred to me, and I don't know if this is possible, it did feel kind of unlikely, but it did occur to me the possibility that the wow, why can't words, the battering ram Grond is actually a repurposing and reforging of the Warhammer Grond.
Oh,
that he keeps it.
Yeah, that he somehow gets his hands on it and spirits it away from Angband during the War of Wrath, and what I mean, you can just imagine Morgoth's embarrassment when they break open his fortress and he reaches for his hammer and it's gone, right? I do not recommend that sort of comedy in dramatic situations like that, but I don't know if it's possible to connect them that directly. I don't know how crazy about it other people will be, but we've got plenty of time to think about it.
We do. And we don't have to even, I mean, that would be a very significant, I am withdrawing my support from Morgoth moment for Sauron, right? A very conscious break. if he's taking back his gift at that point. But I could also see doing it another way. I could also see him coming and finding Grond, perhaps broken or something, after the battle, right? In the beginning of the Second Age, when he's like in the episode or episodes in which we are depicting Sauron's decision, right? Is he going to repent or is he not? What's, what is Sauron's destiny from what is Myron's destiny from here? Which direction is he going to go? So I can see him like going back to the ruins of Angband and discovering broken Grond, lying there and taking it up and taking it with him. But what a fun Easter egg though, right? To have the actual battering ram. At the very least, it has to recall it, right?
Yeah.
The film Grond was cool. It was kind of cool, right? The whole wolf thing looked really impressive, and the whole wolf thing kind of breathing fire, exploding the gates.
Isn't that the way it's described, though? Isn't it described as being like a wolf's head?
Yes. Yes. I'm just thinking it didn't look much like a hammer. Is all I'm saying. Like it's anyway, but I like the idea of the a clearer connection, right? Because of course we, unlike all of these other actual productions, are playing the really long game, right? And so we can absolutely do that.
Marie's trying to keep us on task.
Right. Yeah. Okay. You're right, Marie. We can decide on Third Age Grond later. We do have some time still to think about that. But yeah, no, I love that. I love that touch. I thought that was really fantastic. Let's go back to the plot. So the bad news. So the delivery of the bad news from Finrod. He's delivering the bad news, and he's thinking, I don't want to crush their spirits. They have this, and not only that, Dave, thinking back to your point before, he's not just saying these people have hope and that's a beautiful thing and I don't want to crush their hope. He's also thinking they got sent here looking for the light in the West, right? I'm going to guess that whoever sent them must have known. So what am I supposed to do? He would have some actual uncertainty, wouldn't he? Which would explain why there's a long delay, why he doesn't tell them on day one, because presumably the whole light in the West thing, since they were singing songs about that earlier in the episode, came up during their meeting, right? And so he's waited for a long time before he breaks, or at least a certain amount of time has passed before he breaks the news to them, right? So during that time, he's got to have been thinking, I can't not tell them, right? That the trees are dead, there is no light in the West. But I just want to just say there is no light in the West. You're not wrong, historically speaking. It's just there's news and it's not good. So how is what is his duty to tell? How is this supposed to play out? What is his job? What is his role? Especially if this meeting seems to be in some way destined, as again, I think he would have a hard time not feeling, as Dave was suggesting, that there are clearly bigger things in motion here. So how much does he tell him? How does he tell him? How does he focus it? How does he direct it?
And of course, something I hadn't even thought of before is the fact that they know the world has changed significantly since they left Valinor. They have no idea what Valinor looks like right now.
Right.
For all they know, they could just be making new suns every day over there and sending them up. They have no idea how that works.
Right.
Presumably they figure it out at some point because we get the story, or they think they have it figured out anyway.
Yeah.
So there's that. But one of the things that we were trying to do, and so Rhiannon had the in the script that she wrote, she had a brief discussion between Finrod and Beor after the initial meeting. It's kind of like a denouement to that,
Mm-hmm.
where Beor explains that they've been following the sun um, this whole time. That's where they're going. So the idea of the light in the west, we felt was a difficult concept for them to get across
Right.
in the initial layers of communication. So that conversation takes place in scene
In
9.
scene 9, right? The second scene
Yeah,
with them. Yeah.
right. Now they do have it's pretty clear that Finrod is devastated to tell him, because Beor is really excited, right?
Right.
He because we journeyed to the west and we were told, we believed that we would come to some place that was beautiful, that they would never, that we would stop dying, and you know and there's no evil here, and sure enough, here you are. And
Right.
Fair's like, well, point of order, no.
But
that's
of course, it connects directly to, and we found the guide who can take us to the land, right?
Right.
And,
Right.
I wonder even if we could characterize it as basically the invitation to Nargothrond can be almost Finrod's response to this, right? We could almost, not that he would explicitly say this, right? But almost like an Aragornish, I shall take this as a sign kind of thing, right? When they're like, have you come to guide us to, the land, where the light is in the west? He could be like, yes and no, right?
Yeah.
No, I can't do that, right? That's not possible.
Right.
But actually, yes, maybe that's how, and when and how Finrod decides that bringing them to Nargothrond would be the right thing to do.
Right. And it's in that scene that the invitation comes up.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
essentially, Beor is just kind of mortified because he realizes that his life's mission is all for naught, right?
Well, but
their lives mean nothing.
Exactly. But that's exactly the thing that I have to think. Finrod being who he is, there's no way he's going to be insensitive to that, right? There's no way
Right.
he's just going to crush that without realizing what he's doing, right? Oh
Right.
yes, your life's quest, you're in generational, your generational quest. Turns out it was a fraud the whole time. It turns out it was all a scam, actually, right? He will the thing that he will perceive is their hope, right? This is a people of Estel, defined by their Estel, pursuing their hope into the West. He's going to perceive that. He's going to value that. I think he is more likely to be guided by that himself than to crush it in them, right? And that's why I think why I'm thinking that's the way that Finrod processes it, right? It's not even, so not only would he not tell them, oh yeah, it turns out no, your quest is pointless all along. Not only would he not think that, would he not want to say it that way or want them to feel that, he wouldn't believe it, right? He would believe your quest has led you to me. That's what has happened, right? I am the one who have found you, and you have come seeking the light. It is my, his own Estel, right, would suggest to him that he is to play a role in their finding the light in the West.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
as Stephen Cover says, he does need to say both no and yes.
Yes, he does lay out their option for them.
Yeah.
But Nargothrond is on the table. And so when we get the into scene 11, and I'm kind of bridging scenes 9 and 11 here because there's a lot going on that kind of goes through both of those scenes. So they, so it is the fact that Bayor is devastated that is leading Finrod in this direction. um, and that was ultimately where we found the climax of the episode,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because we found that, like, once word spreads through the camp that this is like everything that they've ever believed for all time is all for nothing. Like, once that news spreads, like, that's a serious demoralization, right?
Very
Like,
serious.
that's hard to come back from, right? And so that's when, in the final scene that we get with them back way down at the end, that's when we get that Bayor telling them, no, 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 the quest hasn't failed. We've been following the sun all this time, and we've been looking for the light in the west, and there it is, right in Finrod's eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what leads them to decide to go to Nargothrond.
Yeah, and this is why I feel like Finrod has to be himself more active in this. Like, he will know how demoralized it. Like, remember that the sentence, "There is no light in the west," right? Is there. Like, we have somebody says that to the men in the Silmarillion. There is no light in the west.
Mm.
But it's fake Umlach who says that. It's like the servant of Morgoth who says that, in order to manipulate them into doing what he wants. Finrod isn't going to say that. Finrod is not going to utter the words of fake Umlach to Bayor and his people, right? He is going to tell them the truth. But this is why I don't think, in the delivery of the bad news, I don't think he's going to... I don't see it as exactly this kind of a crisis, because I think that Finrod is too smart and too compassionate and himself too humble even to let it get there, right? He's not gonna say or let them think, because he's not gonna believe that their mission was for nothing, right? His question, I think that, like, the internal drama within Finrod has to be, what does this mean? They've been sent on a quest, right? Presumably, whoever it was, this has to have come, and this is exactly the kind of way I think that Finrod would think about it. He's the philosopher, Elf King, right? Their mission, there is some truth that has been given to them, right? There's some true vision. They didn't make this up, right? Someone told them that there was a light in the west, and it wasn't Morgoth. Obviously, that's obvious from their stories, right? It's in defiance of Morgoth that they're seeking the light in the west. So somebody told them there was a light in the west. Somebody knew what they were talking about. It was either the Valar or it was Iluvatar himself. Those are the only two options, right? Or Tom Bombadil, but it wasn't him. So there are only two options of who it could be, and neither one of them would be deceiving these people, right? Neither one of them would be lying to these people. So it would not be my job to say, you're wrong, right? I'm speaking against your traditional mythic belief. He would instead be guided by their traditional mythic belief. And instead he would say, what does this mean? What is the message? Dave, as you were saying, like, what is the message for us, right? What are they trying to tell us here? What can we conclude about the fact that these men have been sent in the West, looking for the light in the West? And so I would think, again, that we can make this a direct connection to the invitation. His conclusion is, come live with me in Nargothrond. That must be you must have been sent to us. And then he's going to have this whole thing where he's going to realize, wow, we are to be the light in the west to these people. Just as Orome was sent to the elves, was sent to Grandpa, right? And the other elves in Cuivianen in order to bring them into the west and into the light, and Orome was the guide. So the humans are being invited not into Valinor, because that gate is closed, but here. They've been sent here to Beleriand, to us, to live with us, just as we lived with the Valar over there. And I've been chosen Like, I didn't plan this, but I've been chosen to be the guide. Like, he's going to get the parallel between himself and Orome, right? I'm Orome to these people. And so therefore, he's going to be responding to what he perceives to be a call, right? So his message to them isn't going to be, there is no light in the West. His message to them is going to be not, I am the light in the West, but this, you have arrived at the light in the West. In Beleriand lives the light in Middle-earth. He would tell them the story. He would tell them about how they came. He would tell them about Valinor and how they came from Valinor and how even about the darkening of the trees. But the darkening of the trees isn't, I think he's gonna conclude, he would certainly conclude that the darkening of the trees is not the disappointment of their vision, of their mission. The darkening of the trees proves that their mission wasn't Valinor in the first place, right?
Well,
right?
Well, you're on quite a roll. And,
I'm on a roll.
Yeah.
Just trying to think it through from Finrod's point of view.
Right. There are some things that I'd like to kind of like slow us down to consider.
Okay, good.
One being that this is basically the only story that Beor gets to be kind of the protagonist of. So it was important for us to kind of give him as much agency as possible.
Yep.
In this situation.
I hear
right?
you.
And having him choose.
Yep. And in my Finrod, construction here, I'm kind of turning things around to make Finrod the protagonist.
Well, it's okay. Like I want to make sure that we think all that through. I just that's why I want to just kind of slow this down a little bit.
I hear you. Absolutely.
Because I definitely think that there are definitely elements that we can put all this together. So essentially, having Beor choose Finrod gives him agency in a way that he's kind of going to look like he doesn't have any.
Yep.
If we don't give him that moment to do it.
Agreed.
So there's that.
Agreed.
In addition, if Finrod puts Nargothrond on the table too early in the episode, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's like the big decision point, then we have no story for, like, I mean, yes, we have him putting that on the table pretty early in the episode, right? But essentially what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a sense of trauma where there might otherwise not have been any, by putting the decision in Beor's hands during the final moments of their story there.
Yeah. Now, I am not insensitive to the problem that I am creating, in that the despondency of the people and the choice to make a positive choice and overcome their despondency kind of was the whole big dramatic center of the episode, and I'm trying to eliminate that. So I do understand the difficulties that can create.
I'm not saying that we can't like find a way to make all this work.
No. I hear that.
I just wanted to like reintroduce this element back into the into the mix.
Yep, I hear that. Okay. So first of all, what I was saying before. What I was saying before was, I think, what Finrod would be thinking. That doesn't mean that that's what we have to spotlight, right? We don't actually have to shift it around and make Finrod himself and his own inner thinkings and his own contemplations of what this all means be, in fact, the center of the episode, right? A lot of that can be happening internally. I'm just thinking about the only thing that seems to me a necessary change is I can't see him just crushing their hopes. Finrod's too like that doesn't feel to me like it would work. He wouldn't do that, especially perceiving what a big deal this is, and the really important suggestion that Dave had before, like he would be more likely to say, "What can I learn from this?" rather than, "Oh man, I've got to tell them that it's all crock." Right? He wouldn't do that. So I don't think that So that's the one change that I think needs to happen. But it doesn't mean that there can't be despondency, that there can't be the drama of a choice. There needs to be the drama of a choice.
Right.
So, okay, so we don't have to shift the focus to Finrad's thinking. Finrad's own thinking can kind of be manifest in a few comments that he makes, right? He can just, so we don't get his whole rationale. He just says something like, if I understand aright all that I have heard, then, you should come with me and live in Nargothrond. But okay, but we have to get back to the whole disappointment thing.
Well, at some point, somebody has to tell Olaf that in the summer he's going to melt. Like, essentially, that's what's happening here.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Sure. So said like the parent of a young girl. So I won't even tell you how long I went without seeing that movie. My wife and I actually had to insist on watching that with our boys, who were highly resistant to seeing it.
I can imagine. Yeah.
But we were like, no, you really need to, like, you can't have not seen this movie. So
you should have seen the 13th Warrior first. That's all I'm saying.
That's it. But anyway, okay. So, yes. Here's my suggestion for how we can shift it around, maintain the temptation to despondency, right? Make the dramatic choice still work. And the shift that I would recommend, Finrad's disturbing message is not, there is no light in the West. His disturbing message is, Morgoth's here. Right, you thought you were fleeing the ancient enemy, and coming to, because what I'm imagining, the kind of accretions onto the mythology that have developed within the culture of this people, right? They have come to believe that when they find the light in the West, what that means is safety. Right, they're gonna have arrived in the land of milk and honey. All the streets will be paved with gold, and there will be no threat and no pain and no suffering, and all of the things that they have suffered in the past will all be gone. And especially the enemy, right, who drove them away and from whom they've been fleeing. The light in the West was the alternative, right? They turned away.
There's no cats in America, yeah.
Yeah, no cats in America. That's exactly it. You're on a roll here tonight with the cartoons. Yeah, exactly. So they will have identified, like in their minds, the light in the West means like the safe, secure, perfect, happy place that is the opposite, like on the opposite pole of the world from the enemy from which they fled, right? And so the really crushing news is that in coming to the light in the West, that's where the enemy lives. And in fact, the land of the light in the West is a land at war. It's a land at war with the enemy. Right? And the opportunity that you have is to join the light in resisting the darkness. That's cool and all, but it's nothing like you expected. If peace, security, happiness, and safety is what you were looking for, you've not. That's not at all what it's like. So again, so you see how there's still the same dramatic potential, right? Well, for them to be like, well, if that's what the light in the West is like, we don't want any, thank you very much. We were better off on the other side of the mountain. So there's still going to be a real temptation for them to turn back, for them not to go on and say like, okay, so they're disillusioned. And that is a way that he would have to disillusion. I mean, there's no question in Finrad's mind that he has to say. And you guys had him saying that. Also, I mean, I'm not introducing something new there. But if we make that the locus of their disillusionment and concern and that's what that's still, because then Beor's choice to say, no, we accept the danger, right? We accept that. But then you see the going to Nargothrond is kind of a fun compromise, right? Finrod can be like, well, there is a safe place that I can take you to, right? And I think that this actually sets up really well the further decision that Andreth is going to lead them to make later on, right? Their choice to, I mean, I'm kind of hearing in my head the conversations that Andreth and Finrod are going to be having later on, right? About like, we made the choice to stay and help the light to resist the darkness. We're useless here in Nargothrond, right? This isn't, we're sheltered here. And thank you, that's very kind, right? You have, and they would even, I mean, they would have passed down these legends, right? Audenel would tell. I mean, she's 4, she doesn't remember, but Audenel would have, taught to Andreth how their own like ancestral like myths and have come true, right? Thanks to Finrod. He gave them a place which, because Nargothrond, on a daily basis is going to be like their vision, right, of the light in the West, safe and beautiful and happy, and the streets, some of the streets may be actually paved with gold, right, knowing Finrod. So but yet the choice that Beor makes is not that choice, right? The choice that he makes is to join himself to Finrod's people, to stand with the light against the darkness. That's his dramatic choice there. And so Andreth's choice then later on can be more clear. We can set that up more clearly, and it can be more obvious, like, we need to fulfill. We need to complete the... She's not turning her back on the choice of Beor. She's completing the choice of Beor. She is making again the same choice that Beor made, and explaining to Finrod how... because Finrod himself wouldn't perceive it. He wouldn't have any idea that in taking them into Nargothrond, he's taking them out of the fight because he doesn't know about mortality yet, right? He's just thinking, like, you guys have been on the road for a long time. Come stay with me for a little while, maybe 100, 150 years, whatever, and then we can figure out what to do from there. But of course, he doesn't realize that everyone he's talking to will be dead of old age and have lived their lives and done nothing, right? It's part of the disconnect that we'll be emphasizing later on.
That answers something that was starting to concern me, because if he frames it as it's not necessarily a forever thing, then Beor choosing to go to Nargothrond is not an act of cowardice in hiding from Morgoth. So that's good.
Yeah, it would just be
concerning me a little bit.
Yeah, no, exactly. It would be an act of courage on Beor's part, right? We will stay, we will side with the light to help the darkness. Even that, what you're saying, like that reveal about, like, this is the light in the West. He can confirm, because there will be some who will be saying, so it's all been a lie, right? There is no light in the West, right? There's the land. I mean, there are cats in America, right? This picture that we've had, it turns out to all not be true, right? And Beor will be the one who will say no. Like, we have come looking for the light in the West because we sought security, because we sought peace, because and now we find we've been called to the light in the West in order to stand with the light against the darkness. And that's a better calling. That's a higher calling than merely to shelter within the light. So yeah, Beor can totally make that speech with all sincerity, and Finrod can invite him to Nargothrond, feeling it to be like step 1 of that plan, basically. Here they've made allies.
One other little question, and that's, are you saying that he doesn't tell them about Valinor? Because, like, they've been searching for this land of light in the West where there's no death and all that, and he knows a place that's like that, but he doesn't tell them about.
No,
I mean, obviously Valinor is not a land of light anymore, as far as he knows, but does he not tell them about it?
No, I think he can tell them, but I think he can tell them, though I'm not sure from his point of view. Like, he's not going to hide it, right? But again, I'm putting myself in Finrod's place. The conclusion he is going to come to is if they have been sent looking for the light in the west, and it's obviously impossible for them to get to Valinor, and,
Right.
which, as you say, far as I know, it's not so bright over there anyway anymore. Therefore, I must conclude it is to Beleriand that they have been sent. Beleriand is their destination.
So his focus when it comes to Valinor is not the lack of light there, but the inaccessibility. That's
right.
the important.
He will say, like, there is, yes, like there is off to the sea in the west, across the sea in the west. Yes, there is. Right. There is another land.
That could be one of the options that he brings up. He could say, "Look, I could take you to the shore, but." There's there's a vast sea there that no one can cross.
Right.
Which, of course, is something completely outside of their own experience because they're thinking, like, is it like a big river?
Right, exactly.
Like, is that...
We've crossed a bunch of rivers. Have you even seen the Anduin, Finrod? Come on. Yeah. Yeah.
No, he hasn't.
Yeah, no, he hasn't. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they lost their horse at Tharbad on their way over here, but
yeah.
Anyway, I know that's not the Anduin. It's the Grey Flood still. Point is, okay. So is he going to talk about it? Yeah, he's gonna. But I think we kind of could see how it goes, right? Like we could skip that. I mean, it doesn't have to happen in this episode. Like it doesn't have to be a feature of this episode, that whole conversation, because I think he would be sufficiently convinced that Beleriand is where they are being sent. That's what he would emphasize. Like, of course, he's going to reveal. He's going to want to teach them, and of course, that's another really wonderful thing. I would love to establish a visual parallel at one point, a visual parallel between Beor and the preschool class, right, of the people, like him and Adenel and the other children picking herbs and things in the woods, and Finrod with Beor and the other adults.
Yeah.
Right. Finrod would want to teach them like Beor wants to teach, the children.
Okay.
But I don't think that Finrod would think that it's like essential right now. Again, like because they can't. I mean, he could offer to take them, but why would he even do it? Like he knows it's not possible, right? He knows they can't sail across, so he's not going to get their hopes up and be like, "Well, we'll see. Maybe when we get there, there'll be an island. Somebody will have sent an island in time to catch you." I mean, he can't rule that out, I suppose, right? Maybe they are being called to Valinor. So
presumably,
I guess,
though, that if that's going to happen, he's got to know the Valar can handle doing that without him having to bring them to the beach. Although that's another thing is if he's questioning what his role in their quest is, that is a potential conclusion that he could draw. And so obviously he's got nobody to talk about that with. So,
right.
If he can just bring up the uncrossable sea, at least then that gives us some reason why he's not why he's not talking to them a lot about Valinor.
Yeah. Yeah, and exactly. I mean, he doesn't have to hide it, but again, I don't think it's going to be sent, and especially if we're not having him be the focal, if we want to keep Beor as the protagonist of the episode, I think it's very possible that Valinor needn't necessarily be explicitly discussed, or at least not much in this episode. Yeah. Okay. Does that preserve the drama sufficiently?
Yeah, no, we're fine there.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, but no, I mean, because I do really like the shape of the episode. I mean, I'm like trying to find. I mean, as I say, I can't imagine Finrod saying, "Yeah, give up, folks. There is no light in the west." I can't imagine that.
Right.
I can't reconcile that with Finrod, but I want to preserve the structure, and I think I think the by the way there are cats in America is probably the best way to do that, especially since in my mind that actually makes Beor's decision at the end even more dramatic because
Heroic.
it's actually an act of courage, right? Not only of hope, but also of courage.
Of course, he's never going to see combat ever, but that's okay.
Right. That's fine. He doesn't know that, right? None of them do. I mean, again, not even Finrod, right? None of them. That's going to be the little wrench in the in the spanner in the works. That mortality as a spanner in the works is going to emerge next time as a bit of a startlement. Okay. So we've not talked about the B plot at all, which is Arethel and Gondolin. Let's wait until next time to do that. Okay.
She is the A plot.
That's just what I was thinking. It's perfect. It's perfect. We'll save it for not the next section, because moving forward in and the frame story, that too. Questions for next time. So questions for next time. Our next episode will be Thursday, December 3rd. Okay, so we're gonna give some more time for revision and thought there of episode 2. Next time we're going to be talking about the worldview of men and elves. And I have 2 questions, sort of. They're long. What do you think are some of the most important differences in perspective that would result from the differences in lifespans between men and elves? How would these differences affect their cultures in ways that a member of the other culture would notice, right? So I really want to be thinking through. We've talked about this stuff off and on at different times, right? But I think it's really important for us to be dealing thematic. And here, of course, I want to be remembering our theme of change, right? And how we can emphasize that. I want to make sure we're not, when we're doing interactions between the elves and the men, which of course is going to be a major focal point of this season, I want to make sure that we're not making too many assumptions, right? That they're going to be seeing. I mean, like, we already kind of encountered that to some extent here, right? This idea of, like, Finrod thinking that a 150-year stay in Nargothrond is a mere hiatus for them to gather their strength, right? Whereas, of course, in fact, it turns out to be a multi-generational refuge and sheltering of the people, and from their perspective, or from that human perspective, so memorably voiced by Hurin and Huor and Gondolin later on, a wasting of their lives, right? And their opportunities. So that's one example that just arose in this episode, right? And I want to make sure that we're thinking through things like that. So how would their cultures be different when they encounter each other? What things are they going to notice that are going to be as a result of this fundamental difference between elves and men? So I really want to be thinking that through. And then what other cultural differences are likely to have resulted from the very different histories of the Noldor and the men who come to Beleriand? What's going to strike them? For this whole conversation, I want us to be thinking alternatively about the elf perspective and about the human perspective. What kinds of things are they going to notice, right? What kinds of things are going to jump out at them, which either have to do directly with their whole perspective on the world that comes from their mortality or immortality, and also the Noldor obviously have this history, right? With Morgoth and their journey and their wars. And we have this other nomadic people who have been on this quest, and what is their mythology, and their they don't exactly have a religion, but anyway, what do we say? Of course, like the Noldor having lived with the Valar and been taught, by the Valar and stuff, huge difference in how they relate to the world, right? What are some of those differences, and how would they be noticeable to the humans? What ways would that show up? So that's what we're going to do next time, as sort of an in-between session between episodes 1 and 2. When we come back to episode 2, we'll start with the B plot here in episode 1, which is Arethel and her unrest in Gondolin. So we'll be looking at really kind of the whole Arethel story there. And we'll talk about the frame too, and the way that you guys are building up the frame there. There's less, of course, because there's only snippets of the frame. But we'll talk about then. Okay. So that's the plan for next time. Awesome. Thanks everybody. This was a really fun discussion. I thought this was very fruitful. So thanks everybody. So thanks everybody for joining me. And I will say, as always, thanks for listening and Godspeed.
Thanks for derailing our episode.
Hey, but you have to admit, as tearing your outline
that
to
wasn't me,
shreds
that was
go,
Marie.
which I warned you about, it was fairly gentle, right?
Yeah. No, I could kind of, as you were speaking, I could kind of see a way to make it work, but like at some point I was like, okay, I gotta slow him down because we gotta kind of like back up here for a second.
I know. No, I just needed to think it through, and then we can work it out. It's because you're absolutely, of course, your impulse about not only about the need for, a dramatic narrative arc in this episode, but like where to situate it. I think it's exactly right. So we can make it work. No problem.
I was just telling Marie yesterday that I'm glad that she's in the script discussions, because there are times where she has to do the exact same thing to me, where I just like get on this roll and like I like weave this, what I think is this really cool story, and fortunately Marie is not the sort of person who gets taken in by that sort of thing.
Right.
And she says, yeah, that's great, except that can't be done because of this. Oh yeah, that's right. I can't.
Right. Yep. Yeah, that's cool. All right. Awesome. Thanks everybody. I think we're good to go.
All right.
So we'll be back on the 3rd for some cultural, historical, and philosophical discussions, and then back to especially what's the B plot of episode 2? I forget. It's not
Bayor. Bayor is
Bayor's death, right?
No, not quite.
That's 3?
It's not. It doesn't center around Bayor so much.
Oh, right. That was
Bayor
what was going to
is
be his excursion to the seaside, and we
we figure out some cool stuff to do. Like I'm actually really excited about episode 2.
Cool.
I'm very happy about where that went.
Good.
You guys thought there wasn't that much to talk about for this episode.
Right.
No, that was never what I thought. What I thought was there wasn't a lot of story in the material.
Not a lot of drama, right? Yes. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Cool. All right.
I sat the first 3 episodes I sat looking at and went, and like with just my brain melting, because I was like, how are we going to do anything with any of this? Anyway, I'll stop blabbering.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Awesome. Neat. Okay, excellent. So thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see everybody in 2 weeks.
All right, take care.
Awesome. Thanks everybody. Bye now.
Although the theoretical budget of our hypothetical blockbuster may be unlimited, the production budgets of this and the rest of our fun alternative educational projects are unfortunately not. If you have enjoyed joining our production team, please consider donating at signumuniversity.org/fund.